Welcome, everybody. So good to see all of you. Welcome to our webinar, Celebrate the Season, Kidney Healthy Cooking Together. My name is Doris Liu. I am with the National Kidney Foundation, serving California, Nevada, Oregon, and Washington. Although we have guests today joining us from across the states and beyond. We have registrants joining us from India. So welcome all. I would like to give you a couple of can we do the slide? Oh, got it. I have control of slides now. Thanks, Patty. Couple of reminders, the session is being recorded. The follow-up email will share all the recording and resources, including the mouth-watering recipes. We have turned on closed caption, but you can turn that off in your Zoom settings. And there will be a feedback survey at the end of the webinar. The link will be in the chat and in the follow-up email. Very important, the information shared today is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice from your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or medical team with questions you have about your specific medical condition. For today's webinar, please put the comments and questions in the chat. We encourage you to save your questions until the end, because that's when our speakers will answer your questions. And I will now very briefly share some of our resources that we think will be very important to you all. Remember, all slides will be shared in the follow-up email. Our Kidney Learning Center provides free online self-paced education on topics including first steps to transplant, how to get started, how to get on that transplant wait list, finding a living donor, becoming a living donor, and then what to expect after you receive a kidney transplant. NKF Cares is a helpline for patients, caregivers, and living donors. They can answer your questions and even send you resources. Are you looking for a living donor? How do you even tell others that you need a kidney? The Patient Navigator program connects you with a trained transplant recipient who will be your patient navigator to help you through that process of how to share your story. And I love that a friend or family member can work with the navigator on your behalf. We have a podcast called Hot Topics for Kidney Patients. So really, really great episodes. Some recent episodes include managing fluid intake as a patient. Another one, treatment options for undocumented people with kidney disease. And we also have a podcast for health professionals. We will share that in the follow-up email as well. Online kidney communities. Hear what other patients are experiencing, hear what they're asking. You can also ask questions anonymously and hear from the kidney community. And now I want to hand it over to our friend Karen with Pentec Health.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Doris. It's an honor to be here today and to be a part of this program. My name is Karen McNeely. I'm a dietitian and a clinical account manager with Pentec Health. Pentec has been serving dialysis patients for over 40 years. We have a unique blend of protein formula known as intradialytic parenteral nutrition, which is IDPN for patients on hemodialysis, and intraperitoneal nutrition, which is IPN, and that's for patients who are on home dialysis. So we have a big team of dietitians, pharmacists, nurses, insurance specialists, and our duty is to provide quality care to our patients and service excellence. Next slide. If you'd like more information, you can visit proplete.com. There's also an 800 number that you can call. And I believe my contact information is going to go out to you in a follow-up slide. So feel free to call me, email me if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I have the absolute pleasure of introducing one of our two stars and speakers today, Chef Duane Sunwold. Get away.
Thank you, Doris. So yes, I'm a kidney patient. I also am a culinary arts instructor at a community college. And I'm going to just give you kind of a brief overview of my story, and then we'll get into the really fun part, learning from our great dietitian and go over some great recipes. So when I turned 40, I started losing energy and thought that's what happened at your midlife. And I didn't do anything about it. And I just continually got worse until finally I went to the doctor and I was identified with high blood pressure and I had migraine headaches. So I was treated for 3 months for those symptoms and never actually being treated for what was the cause. So after 3 months, they finally figured out it was my kidneys and I was spilling a ton of protein. So I was sent to my first nephrologist, who never talked to me about diet. In fact, the only thing their office ever said was don't eat anything salty. That was the extent of my nutritional recommendations. So over the next year and a half, I actually started getting worse. You can see from the slide here that in 2001, my creatinine level was 4.7. Actually, at its worst, it had reached 4.9. And my microalbumin, I was spilling about over 12 grams of protein. So I have a friend who's a clinical dietitian. She's a colleague. We talked together, and I was always sending her a copy of my labs. And so one Thursday morning, she comes in my office before work, just freaked out and said, I want to do an experiment. I want to take you off of animal protein for 90 days. And I'm like, okay, I've been sick for a long time. I'm willing to do this. Let's start tomorrow. And she said, no, I want you to wait for the week after the weekend. I want you to have this weekend to eat what you want. Well, as you can see from my picture, I was about 75 pounds heavier than what's standing in front of you right now. And I, as a patient, heard her say I could eat as much as I want. So I was trying to figure out all day Thursday and all day Friday, what am I going to eat? What is all this protein I'm going to consume, which we know is not always good for kidney patients. And I decided that we were going to have pepperoni pizza with extra cheese because I heard the dietitian say you can eat what you want, and I heard eat as much as you want. So I ate 2 large pepperoni pizzas with extra cheese Friday night for dinner. And no surprise to all the medical professionals and probably the patients listening in today, I was pretty sick by about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And in fact, I was so sick, I didn't eat anything all weekend. And then I realized about Sunday afternoon, I'm like, oh, the pizza did this to me. So I was pretty motivated come Monday morning to try this new diet. And I have to tell you, I approached it as a very egotistical chef. I've been around food all my life. This is going to be a piece of cake. Well, I didn't realize changing an eating pattern that you'd had for 40 years is not as easy as people think. So I tried it. I literally Monday morning, I took out as much animal protein out of my diet as I could. And then over the next 2 weeks, I actually started feeling better. And 1.5 years of medications never made me feel that good. I was absolutely shocked. And at the end of the month, I went back to my doctor and I'm like, this is amazing. I feel great. Why didn't someone tell me this before? And she said, we didn't really know. We just knew it impacts kidney patients. We just never know how much diet does impact kidney patients. So over about a 2.5, 3-year period, I stayed on my diet and I actually was able to be weaned off of all medication. So fast forwarding to today, 23 years later, I have been in remission this entire time. I do still follow my diet. So I want to show you my next driver's license because in Washington State, we're required to have our pictures taken every 5 years. So after listening to a dietitian and following some really good nutritional advice, go ahead and click one more time. Yeah, you'll see that my creatinine level went from a 4.7 to a 1.1. Actually, today it's 0.8, and my microalbumin, I went from spilling over 12 grams to now I'm around about 14 milligrams. So diet has a huge, huge impact, I believe, on kidney disease. And I absolutely love this opportunity to be able to talk about kidney disease, nutrition. And I want to also introduce our next speaker because it's always been a goal of mine to be able to work with her because I get the opportunity to work with a lot of dietitians. She's by far one of my favorites. So I'd like to introduce Chhaya Patel.
Thank you, Duane. Thank you. You're my favorite as well, Duane. to work with. So I'm Chhaya Patel, and I work with DaVita Kidney Care. I have been with DaVita almost 30 years. I'm located in Northern California in Walnut Creek, and I'm a divisional lead dietitian for DaVita. So it's been a long time in this field, and have seen many changes. What we are going to share with you today is just a very small part of it, but I am happy to be here. I am so happy to see some familiar faces and some familiar names here. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and hope to give you some information that you can use with your patients. So first thing first, how can a patient reach the goals that they have? It's more important to talk about their goals than our goals. It may be about the diet. It may be about adding more fiber, whole grain foods. It may be about exercise. It may be about diabetes control. So it's more about asking the patients what they would like to do and what their goals are. As far as the kidney nutrition for kidney disease, we like to talk about some of this nutrients like calories, protein, potassium, sodium, fiber, calcium, phosphorus, and PTH for MBD, and also the medications that help our kidney patients like iron for anemia, renal vitamins, binders, oral vitamin D, and cinacalcet. So moving to the next slide, the first thing first, calorie recommendation. So KDOQI recommends 25 to 35 calories per standard body weight for metabolically stable patients. As you all know, the normal BMI is between 19 and 25. So if patient needs to lose weight, they need to go down to about 25 calories per kilogram. If they need to gain weight, they need to up their calories to about 35 calories per kilogram. So what is the metric that we look for as far as the protein is concerned? We look at albumin, and the optimal albumin level is 4 or higher than 4 grams per deciliter. And protein supplements are available for many patients who have infection or inflammation. And when their albumin level drops quite a bit because of the inflammation. During dialysis, many of the providers provide oral nutrition supplement, which is called ONS program. It is available for qualifying patients. And one thing I really want to emphasize here is that PD patients do get about up to 500 calories from the dextrose solution because the dialysate is made up of the dextrose solution. So in a way, for the patients who are not eating enough, that is added calories for them. The ones who need to lose weight, they need to control more from the diet. So again, that is something that we do have to keep in mind when it comes to PD. So why albumin? Why is it so important? It is important because it's a strong predictor for patients' health. And why is it a strong predictor? Because if you have low albumin, it increases the mortality, morbidity, and hospitalizations. And none of our patients like to end up in the hospital, and none of us like to end up in the hospital. So it's a strong predictor. Also, it is essential for wound healing, muscle building. It is needed for prevention of infections, especially during the flu season. Got to have good amount of protein to prevent the infection. Again, keeps the fluid out of the vascular system and also acts as a transporter for many of the medications. So it has a very, very important role. Now, majority of the time, when we talk about albumin or the protein, we always talk about diet, but there could be other factors that affect albumin as well. So what could be the root causes? The nutritional root causes could be poor intake, so the patient is not able to eat. It could be because of the cost. They don't have food available, or they are not able to shop, or they're not able to prepare the food, or they don't have anybody who prepares food for them. It could be excess fluid intake. We like to think that that is not one of the reasons, but many times if the patient is fluid overloaded, the albumin gets diluted, and we do see low albumin level. Also, diet restriction. There are so many restrictions on the when the patient is on dialysis, and if they don't know what to eat because they're scared, they may be restricting the diet a little too much. On the right side, we have the GI problems like appetite, chewing, swallowing difficulties, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, malabsorption, gastroparesis with diabetic patients. So albumin can drop because of any of these reasons. And then there are non-nutritional causes as well. And they could include the inflammation because of periodontal disease, wounds, blisters. We see that in many of our patients. Surgery can cause inflammation as well, and smoking can cause inflammation as well. Many of you know, if you know PD well, peritonitis is one of the big ones and causes drop in albumin like anything. And those patients definitely need a high amount of protein. Anemia, blood loss, metabolic acidosis, psychosocial issues, financial issues, fluid overload, inadequate dialysis, it causes uremia, and that causes poor appetite as well. Protein losses during dialysis. On PD, patients seem to lose about up to 15 grams of protein per day, and hemodialysis patients lose some protein as well. And then there are multiple comorbidities like cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, ischemic bowel disease, arthritis. All of those other diseases can cause inflammation as well, and can cause poor albumin level. So it's not always what the intake is, but also the other factors that we really need to take a look at. So as you can see, some of these are high protein foods. Actually, all of these are high protein foods. So what's missing? There are some foods that are missing. It's not all inclusive list here on the slide. So you can put it in the checkbox. What are some of the high protein foods that are missing? And I am going to ask, okay. So I'm going to move to the next slide and share some with you. So I see plant-based sources. Yes, plant-based proteins. Absolutely. Thank you, Judy. So non-dairy milk substitutes like almond milk and soy milk, also different cheeses and whole grains, dry beans, lentils, peanut butter, some of the other nut butters are also good sources of protein. And definitely dietitian can work with each one of the patient, and as appropriate, they can include some of these foods or substitute these foods for the animal-based protein based on the potassium level and the phosphorus level as well, because we do need to monitor those when it comes to dried beans and lentils. So now I'm going to pass it back to Patty for Duane's recipe. It's going to make you hungry for sure. Eddie, are you able to play the video?
Well, I thought I had, so you all are not seeing the video?
No.
No.
That's exciting, isn't it? Let's try again.
We're gonna make bread stuffing. We're gonna start by making the cornbread.
We hear the audio, but we don't see the.
All right, I am going to come out of there and again. Sorry, folks. Of course, this worked every time we did it during practice.
So we're gonna make cornbread stuffing.
Yep,
We're gonna
it's
start by
working.
making the cornbread, and it's a very
We
simple
can
recipe.
see it.
We're going to use all-purpose flour. You can use a gluten-free all-purpose mix if you have people who are gluten intolerant. So I'm going to take my flour, my sugar, cornmeal, and baking powder. And you want to mix all of those together. So you'll see everything's kind of turned a slight yellow color. That's what you want. And then in another bowl, we're going to go ahead and mix all of our wet ingredients. So I have low-fat buttermilk. We're going to add 2 eggs. And I have a half a cup of melted butter. You can also use vegan butter or plant-based butter. And what we're going to do is we're going to just mix those together. You want to beat up those eggs, make sure your melted butter is mixed in with your buttermilk. And then you're going to want to pour your wet ingredients into your dry ingredients. You're going to mix that till it's a moist, wet batter. And it's okay if there's little lumps left in it because that's all going to bake out. And then we're going to take our baking pan and just spray it lightly. And you want to pour your batter into your baking dish. And then it's ready to be put right into the oven. So we're going to bake that at 350 degrees for about 25 to 35 minutes until you can stick a toothpick in it and the toothpick comes out clean. You can also make this cornbread a day ahead of time, so it saves yourself some extra work on the actual day of your meal. So our cornbread has cooled. We're going to take it out of the pan and we're going to dice it into cubes. And you want to have one layer of cubed cornbread on your baking sheet so that they will all brown fairly evenly in the oven. So in my household, I always have to do this when no one's around because people want to eat the cornbread and not let me make it into the actual stuffing. Now to make this into stuffing, we're going to put this in a 400-degree oven for about 20-25 minutes. You want to check it just to make sure that the cornbread turns to a nice golden brown, and then we're going to add the flavoring to this. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just browning my breakfast sausage. This is a sage breakfast sausage. Once it's browned, I've poured off the fat, and now I'm going to pour the sausage off just while I saute my onions and my celery. And I'm going to add, this is a half a cup of vegan butter. I know that seems like a lot, but that's going to be our only moisture for the stuffing that we're going to make. So I'm adding my diced celery, my diced onions. And what I want to do at this point is I want to try to make sure and coat all my vegetables with a little bit of that butter. I'm sorry you can't smell this. This smells really good. So we're going to saute the onions and celery just till the onions are translucent. So you're going to see them go from white to opaque. When they go to opaque, they actually give us that cooked onion flavor. Now we're ready to add our seasoning. So we're going to add some dry sage. So remember, there's sage in the sausage, so this is going to intensify that. We're going to add just some poultry seasoning, which also has sage but has other spices and herbs in it, and some dried thyme. And I want this to kind of be coated a dark green specks. That will tell me I have enough seasoning in here. This is what always reminds me of the holidays, is this poultry and sage combination. You want to let this cook for just a couple minutes, and the reason for that is that the oils are going to come out of those dried herbs. So now I'm going to add back my browned sage breakfast sausage. Just let that reheat for a moment. And remember, we called this cornbread stuffing, so now we're going to add our toasted cornbread. And all I want to do is try to just mix together those vegetables, that sausage. That half a cup of butter is going to start being absorbed into these cubes of cornbread. And if you want, you can actually make this the day ahead as well, and then take it out of the fridge, let it warm up for about 15-20 minutes before you put this into the oven. And then you just want to reheat this up to a temperature of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So what I like to do is, you can see there's still some vegetables and some sausage left. So I wait till I get all my croutons and my cornbread in there, and then I sprinkle this on top. So this is a way to help make sure that it gets distributed over everything. And then we're going to put this back into the oven until it reaches 165 degrees. And then it's ready to be served. And we're ready to just put it in a serving bowl. And there you go. That's going to look gorgeous on your holiday table.
Duane, that looks so delicious. I think it's making everybody hungry right now.
Well, thank you. Yes. I do have a couple things I wanted to say. The one thing I like about this recipe is there's only like 6 ounces of sausage for 8 people, so it's not a full serving. But if people don't want to add meat in there, they want to use a plant-based version, you can chop up mushrooms and replace of the sausage and just add a little more sage and poultry seasoning, and you'll get that same intense flavor.
Yes, and I was also thinking, Duane, that tofu can be used, the crumbled tofu can be used instead of the sausages as well. And that's high in protein, and it's a complete protein. So they can still get the protein and have plant-based protein.
Right. There is, and then there's one other thing. If they wanted to not use buttermilk, they want to use a plant-based milk. 1 cup of plant-based milk to a teaspoon of vinegar will raise the acidity level of a plant-based milk. So they can do that as a substitute as well.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome suggestion. Thank you so much. So I think we are going to move forward to other content, and we will definitely share more recipes as we go through the other content as well. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about potassium. So I know potassium is a big concern for many of our dialysis patients, and the recommendation for majority of the patients is 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams per day. Some patients can have more than 3,000, depending on how much residual renal function they have, whether they are on PD or hemo or HHD. The normal level for potassium is 3.5 to 5.5 milliequivalent per deciliter. And of course, the possible causes for high potassium could be eating too many high potassium foods, or also, even if it is a good food, not so high in potassium, but if it is ingested in a very large quantity. I know some of my patients used to say, well, you told me I can have grapes or strawberries, but I had a whole basket full of it. Of course, the basket full of it is going to cause high potassium, right? And so they do need to be careful with the portion size. And then inadequate dialysis, skipping dialysis or cutting the dialysis treatment short, that is going to cause high potassium. GI bleed or any other internal bleeding could be causing high potassium as well. Improperly handled lab tubes. Many times it gets hemolyzed if it is not spun right, and that will show high potassium as well. And then elevated blood sugar, drop in kidney function. Some of the high blood pressure medications like lisinopril can cause high potassium as well. So need to be careful with other reasons as well. It's not always just the food. It could be medication. It could be the drop in the kidney function. And so really important to follow that. But at the same time, I think there is a huge value in having those fruits and vegetables that have a good amount of fiber. And plant-based foods have a lot more fiber than the animal-based foods. So what are the advantages? The advantages are that it has high level of antioxidants and the vitamins as well. So it helps to reduce the inflammation in the body. It also increases the fiber, which helps with the gut microbiome and increases the intestinal transit in the gut. And that increases the fecal uremic toxin excretion as well as the potassium excretion. So the patient can eat more potassium, but then can excrete more potassium because of the fiber. It increases the alkali intake and reduces the metabolic acidosis. And the last one, it does increase the polyunsaturated fats and decreases the saturated fats, which helps with improving the lipid profile. And that helps with cardiovascular disease, lowering the cardiovascular disease, decreasing the CKD progression, and also reduces the risk of death. So very, very important to have the plant-based foods like fruits and vegetables, different colors, the antioxidants. Overall, it's much, much healthier for cardiorenal health. So now we are going to go back to the recipe. One more recipe on quinoa apple stuffed acorn squash recipe.
All right, I'm launching. Let me know if it works.
Okay.
We're going to take an acorn squash, and what we want to do is we want to cut this in half. So
Is it working?
half of an
Yep.
acorn squash.
Yes.
Hey.
So they're very easy to work with. You just want to make sure that you cut down the center. And you want to cut towards the stem. Make sure that it goes all the way. And then twist your knife, and that pulls them apart. So now what we're going to do is we want to just scrape these seeds out. So you'll see that there's no seeds left inside. And all I'm doing is using a spoon to scrape them out with. And then you want to take just a little bit of maple syrup and spread it on the inside before we roast these off. So you'll see I'm only adding 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of maple syrup. And I just want to rub that all along the inside where it's yellow on my acorn squash. And then we're going to bake this at 375 degrees for about 30 minutes or until the acorn squash is just soft and tender. So these are ready to go into the oven. Our acorn squash has been baking for about 25-30 minutes. They're nice and soft. We're going to take them out of the oven. And now we're going to make the actual filling and then put these back in the oven. So we are going to be now making the filling for our acorn squash. So I have pre-cooked quinoa, which is a grain, which has a great protein source. Diced Granny Smith apples. Some cran raisins. And then we're going to add sage, just a touch of black pepper, cinnamon, cumin, coriander, onion powder, and a little bit more maple syrup. And then you just want to mix this all together. You want to make sure that all those spices get all over the quinoa and the apples. Just going to add a touch more cinnamon. Even though I know this is a savory dish and we think cinnamon for desserts, cinnamon can also be used in savory dishes as well with a really great fall flavor. And now what we want to do is just divide this up and put this inside our acorn squash. That's what that wonderful little hole is for. And then we're going to put this back in the same oven for about 15 or 20 minutes until the center is hot and those apples are soft. So we're taking our roasted acorn squash out of the oven. Our center is hot and our apples are nice and soft. There you go. So we have quinoa stuffing inside an acorn squash. This could be used as a main dish for any of your guests that are vegetarian or wanting to go plant-based. And this also makes a great side dish for anyone who's also going to be eating meat.
So Duane, one thing I know we talked about was the amount of potassium because of the acorn squash. So the portion size can be cut into half. Some patients may not eat the whole half. Some may, depending on their potassium level, they can cut back on the quantity. But it's a great way to get fiber. It's a great way if they need the potassium to get the potassium from the squash.
Yes. So when they plate those up, you know how chefs, we like how our food to look pretty in the plate presentation. So a half a squash looks really pretty to us. But
Yes.
for portion control, yes, I would put them on a platter and then I would slice that half and cut it into a quarter. And then you'd be cutting down that mineral count by half.
Yes, absolutely. And I loved how you used different spices like the cinnamon and the sage, which really helps to reduce the sodium. It really helps to give that nice flavor and taste to the dish.
Yeah, it gives you those seasonal flavors that we want.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So now we are going to move to sodium. And as I just mentioned, there are so many different spices and herbs that we can use in order to reduce the sodium content for the food. Normally, our diet has about 4,000 milligrams of sodium per day. That's the normal American diet, right? And we're asking our patients to eat about 2,000, 2,300 milligrams per KDOQI guideline. And that is almost the half, right? And the allowance is based on the ultrafiltration rate or the removal of the fluid, because the sodium makes the patients thirsty. They drink more, they have more fluid gains, and then they have to be, the fluid has to be removed. So that's it. That's where the ultrafiltration rate comes in. How fast can we remove that fluid, or how much we can remove that fluid? And also, does the patient have residual renal function that can take care of some of the fluid? So limiting the sodium or the salt at cooking, also at the table, is something that we recommend to all of our patients. And so high sodium is also found in fast food, convenient foods, cured meats, canned soups. As you know, those cup of noodle soups are full of sodium. The salty snacks and sauces as well. So using herbs and spices instead of the salt is very important. Reading the nutrition label is very, very important, and limiting the sodium to about 500 milligrams per meal, so that if you're eating 3 meals, it would be about 1,500 with the meals and then 500 with the snacks. So breaking it down really helps. If you're eating only 2 meals a day, you can break it down into 2. But increased sodium intake, it can increase the thirst, and then we have to remove that fluid if you are on dialysis, which becomes a challenging job. So it is always good to limit the sodium. And now we are going to go to the recipe that talks about using the vegetables and some of the seasonings so that you don't have to use the sodium.
So we're going to do a holiday roasted vegetable side dish, which is very healthy. No salt is added to it. We're going to start with our diced carrots. Then we're going to add our Brussels sprouts that have been cut in half. The stems have been cut out. Then we're going to add diced sweet potatoes. And we're going to add diced red peppers. So you can see this is going to be very, very colorful. And what I want to do is I'm going to add my olive oil, my balsamic vinegar, then I want to add my dried oregano, dried marjoram, and some black pepper. And you want to mix this up with your hands because you want to make sure that all those herbs, spices, vinegar, and oil get on all of the vegetables. And it's okay if the Brussels sprout leaves fall apart. Because what we're going to do when we roast these is it helps bring out all the flavor of the vegetables. So everything feels coated, like it's got a little bit of oil. I can smell the vinegar, I can smell the herbs. And then you want to put this, lay this single layer on a sheet pan. So you can see I have a very large pan. At home, I would probably use 2 baking sheet pans to do this. So notice how I've got a single layer of vegetables. They're all mixed up, okay? And we're going to stick this in the oven at 400 degrees. We're probably going to, about 20, 30 minutes into this, we're going to want to check them, possibly turn them over. The idea here is we want to roast them so they've got a nice golden brown color to them, and that's going to help bring out the flavor. So I'm taking out our roasted vegetables. They smell wonderful. You've got that roasted Brussels sprouts. You can smell the red peppers. I know there's a sweetness in there from the carrots and the sweet potatoes. And then if you want to bump up the flavor just a little bit more, we're going to drizzle just a little bit more balsamic vinegar right before you serve them. And give that just a minute for that to run down and soak all the way through to the bottom. And you have a great roasted vegetable dish to go on your holiday table.
That looked so beautiful.
Thank you.
Colorful. So there was a question and I answered it, Duane. What can be substituted for Brussels sprouts and cauliflower? I think bell peppers, all colors would be wonderful. Anything you would suggest?
I've also roasted broccoli as well.
And leeks, yep.
Yep, and leeks. You can put a little onion in there. That always intensifies the flavor. And then the other thing is, besides balsamic vinegar, fruit vinegars are another great way of adding flavor without adding sodium. And they're usually a little milder, so they're not as sharp as like an apple cider vinegar.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Got some good comments in the chat box as well. So as I mentioned earlier, when we have higher salt intake, we get more thirsty and we drink more fluid. Our patients have limitation on fluid. Based on ultrafiltration, and as I mentioned earlier, how much kidney function they have left, the residual renal function. So it is suggested that they have 1,000 ml of fluid per day, and if they have the residual renal function, add the urine output, the amount of it. So if the patient has 500 ml of urine output every day, 1,000 plus 500 would be 1,500 ml per day allowance for fluid. And 1,000 ml is 4 8-ounce cups. So remember, it's 8-ounce, 4 cups, and then add 2 more to it. So it would be about 6 cups in a whole day. So excess fluid intake can cause high blood pressure and increase need for treatment time as well. And I know majority of the patients don't like to stay longer than they have to. If they are on PD, they will need to use higher concentration and higher volume in order to pull that fluid off. And that is not healthy as well for the peritoneum. So it's really important to watch the sodium and fluid both, but at the same time, during the holidays, everybody's going to drink a little bit more. So be extra careful with the sodium. So why are we talking about fluid? Because there is a risk of fluid overload, and you don't want to end up in the hospital. We see that too often. So the effect on the heart is that on the left side, it's a healthy heart. On the right side, we have unhealthy heart, which is pumping too much blood or working very hard because of that fluid overload. And when the heart has to work so hard to pump the blood, it can become thicker and it can become stiffer. So over the time, it will not be able to effectively pump the blood. And we see patients with coming in low blood pressure, leaving with low blood pressure, and it's hard to remove the fluid when the blood pressure is too low. So it's really important to watch the amount of fluid so that the heart doesn't have to pump so hard and doesn't become enlarged and doesn't become stiffer and thicker. So what is fluid? Many times we get questions from teammates, we get questions from patients. So is the ice considered liquid? Yes, it is liquid at room temperature. Popsicle? Yes, it is liquid at room temperature. Same thing with gelatin, ice cream, and then liquid in the soup and porridges. Also coffee and tea, whether it's cold or hot, it is liquid at the room temperature. And then liquid nutritional supplements. Many times we forget about the supplements that are liquid as well. So those are all considered liquid. So we have to count those in 1,000 ml or 1,000 cc's. Another important nutrient that sometimes we don't talk about or include is the fiber. And it is recommended to maintain regular bowel movement and avoid constipation, especially for the patients who are on PD. Because at the bottom, like it says, if the patient has constipation, it increases the peritonitis, risk of peritonitis. And the patients who don't have constipation problem, there is a lower risk of peritonitis. So what do we recommend? We recommend 5 fresh fruits and vegetables every day. And hopefully those are all colorful full fruits and vegetables like Duane had for the roasted vegetables. It increases the antioxidants. It increases the fiber as well in the diet. And fiber helps to control the blood sugar as well as triglyceride levels. Of course, the stool softener and laxatives can be prescribed by the physician, but the better way to go about it would be with the food, and food can be the medicine in this case. So moving to portion control. Those of you who are trying to control the weight, portion control is very important. It may be surprising for some of you to compare the standard serving size to what is typically served and consumed by most of us. So the good practice is to divide the plate into 4 different portions, 4 quarters, 1 for protein, 1 for carb, 1 for vegetables, and 1 for fruits. And that is a good practice. Also limiting concentrated sweet, limiting simple refined carbs. And at the end of the deck, I've also provided the portion control or the portion sizes for like example, slice of bread, for bagel. I know most of us eat those big bagels, but it's only half that is 1 serving, right? So we do need to look at the serving sizes. Limiting alcohol would help as well, and limiting trans fats, saturated fats, cholesterol, that helps as well with the PD patients and controlling their lipid profile. Also increasing the exercise can help as well. Of course, that is with the physician approval and recommendation. So moving to iron and vitamins. Anemia management includes erythropoietin stimulating agents, and it also includes iron if required. So majority of our patients get IV iron during the dialysis. or the clinic visit. Iron, oral iron may be prescribed as well, and it's usually taken between the meals, separate from phosphate binders and separate from the calcium supplements. Renal vitamins or B complex with C are also recommended, and always recommended that you take vitamin C with iron supplement. Moving on to a big topic, mineral bone disease, MBD management. What does that include? It includes phosphorus, calcium, PTH, and the phosphorus level is considered normal between 3.5 and 5.5. Calcium is normal between 8.4 and 10.2. The daily recommendation for calcium is 2,000 milligrams per day. For phosphorus, it's 800 to 1,000 milligrams usually, but it is more important to maintain the normal phosphorus level and also meet the protein requirement at the same time, which is challenging. Believe me, it is challenging. So the MBD management includes or involves maintaining calcium and phosphorus balance and also controlling parathyroid hormone levels. So how do we do that? So calcium, most of it is found in teeth and bones. There is only 1% that is found in the serum. But if it is too high or too low, it can cause some problems. It is needed definitely for clotting and nerve impulse. It is needed for muscle contraction, healthy bones, teeth, and energy metabolism, where it includes ATP. The P part of the ATP is the phosphorus. And you probably remember the energy cycle from your high school days. Maybe it was too long ago and maybe you don't remember, but that's where it is involved. So, sorry, I'm moving a little too fast. So the sources for calcium are dairy products, one for sure, and that would include milk, cheese, ice cream, all kinds of stuff. Dark leafy vegetables, fortified foods, some over-the-counter medications like Tums for heartburn, and also calcium-containing phosphate binders. So those are some of the calcium-containing sources. What can happen if there is too much calcium? It is called hypercalcemia, and it causes the risk of heart disease, because there is a risk of calcification of the soft tissues. Heart and lungs are soft tissues. And if the calcium sits in those soft tissues, it forms the bone where it should not be forming the bone. And it can also cause confusion in some of our patients. What can low calcium cause? Hypocalcemia, which can be painful muscle spasms, also can cause osteoporosis, confusion, tetany, and when it's extremely low, we don't see this very often, but when it's extremely low, you see the seizure disorders in our patients. So moving on to phosphorus, the target serum phosphorus level is 3.5 to 5.5, as I mentioned earlier. It's very challenging for our patients to maintain the optimal phosphorus level, and that's why they need the binder prescriptions. And it needs to be according to the timing prescribed, frequency prescribed, and the dose prescribed. The sources for phosphorus are, you may be surprised, but protein foods are high in phosphorus as well. Dairy products, colas and beverages with the phosphorus additives, nuts and seeds, food preservatives, cheese flavored snacks like Cheetos, quick breads like biscuits and cornbread, and also beer, and some of the alcoholic beverages could be high in phosphorus as well. So I just mentioned that protein foods can be high in phosphorus, like poultry, seafood, beef, pork are example of the high protein foods that are high in phosphorus. So 9 ounces of meat can have 600 milligrams of phosphorus, which is more than half the requirement for the day or allowance for the day. So we talked about vegetarian or the plant-based foods like dried beans, peas, peanut butter, cheese, yogurt, pudding. Those are all good sources of protein, and they have phosphorus, but we have to remember that the additives are the biggest culprit for phosphorus intake. And those can be all of the ones listed on the left side, like phosphoric acid, polyphosphate, pyrophosphate, potassium tripolyphosphate, aluminum phosphate. All those are additives, and they are absorbed 100%. So it causes more damage than any of the plant-based foods that we talk about. So bioavailability for the phosphorus, it needs to be taken into account, and not the phosphorus content of the food only. So as I mentioned, the plant-based foods, the bioavailability is very low. It's less than 50%. So if we think that dried beans are high in phosphorus, it's absorbed only 50%. So not 100% is available because humans do not have the enzyme, which is called phytase, to break down the phytate in the beans or the plant-based foods. The phosphate bioavailability from the processed foods or the additives is 100%, 90 to 100%. And one of the recent articles suggested that 40% of the total phosphate intake may be attributable to phosphate-containing additives. So can you imagine almost 40% coming from the additives? Bioavailability from the animal-derived proteins or unprocessed meats could be more than 70%. And from the processed meats or the ones with the additives, it could be even higher. So it is very important not just to talk about the phosphorus content, but also the additives, the inorganic phosphorus, and what is available from the plant-based versus the animal-based protein. So when the patients have high phosphorus, what happens? It can cause the bone disease, renal osteodystrophy, we call it, calcium deposition in its soft tissues like the blood vessels, heart, lungs, and can cause itching. You will hear many of our patients talking about itching, red eyes, itchy eyes, sores on their skin. And if the phosphorus level is very low, which doesn't happen very often, but does happen if the patient is not eating very much or doesn't have good appetite, it can cause weakness and muscle dysfunction as well. Moving on to KDOQI guideline, and these are the guidelines that we follow. They are basically recommendations from the doctors, teams of dietitians and nurses. They work together and come up with suggestions, and those are the KDOQI guidelines. So on the right side, as you can see, use the clinical judgment and evaluate the MBD trends for the calcium, phosphorus, and PTH. And restriction can come. We have to remember that if we are restricting the diet too much, it can compromise the protein status. So efficacy of the dietary phosphorus restriction is not established. Consider the animal versus the plant-based proteins, like Duane suggested earlier. He made the transition to plant-based diet and improved his kidney function, and also focuses on the individual needs. So every individual is different and needs more individualized focus on each of these nutrients. When it comes to potassium, they kind of go hand in hand, phosphorus and potassium. So dietary restrictions should also be considered with the overall diet of the patient, and also take a look at the cardiorenal health of the patient, not just the potassium level. So I just wanted to touch base with you about the cultural foods and renal diet. As you can see on this slide, many of these cultures do use beans and lentils and soybeans and tofu and some of the non-dairy milk products. And like coconut milk, that is high in protein as well, but it is high in potassium. But is it all absorbed? No. So one of the things that we need to remember when we are working with our cultural or different cultures or different ethnic groups is that it is important to include some of those foods in their diet, because to comply with the diet long term, they will need to include some of those foods. We have over 55% of Californians who are from different ethnic groups. And so we do need to accommodate some of those food habits into their renal diet and make adjustment and make suggestions that work for those ethnic groups. If you ask a Filipino patient, 80 years old, not to eat pancit or not to eat adobo, it's not going to work because they are going to eat it. If you ask a vegetarian patient from India to start eating meat, it's not going to work. They are going to eat the beans and the lentils. So we need to accommodate and suggest the quantity that they can eat and how they can prepare it so that they will not be in trouble and be safe during the holidays. So ethnic festivals and religious holidays are very important because that's when they have celebrations and they do eat some of those foods. So when they come into dialysis and when you check the blood, if their potassium is high or their phosphorus is high, you know that it is because of some of those foods that were eaten. But then you can also increase their, suggest them or educate them to increase their binders when they have high phosphorus food, or when they are fasting. So fasting in some of those cultures is not completely restraining from any food intake. It could be just limiting it to fruits and dairy products or just dairy products. So then when the patient comes in to the treatment, they may have just had dairy products for the whole day that day. So it is really very, very important to be aware of the cultural foods. And many of these ethnic groups use Ayurvedic medications as well and the herbal products. So it is good to know what those herbal products are made up of. So recommend to include variety of foods with consideration of sodium, potassium, and phosphorus allowance. And vegetarian patients can consult with their dietitian. There are many, many different education materials available for the dietitians to know about these different cultures. So going back to principles of phosphorus management, one thing for sure is the healthy kidney diet, binders, adequate dialysis, preserving the residual renal function, and then motivational interviewing, engage the patient in their own care, and also teamwork. Work with the whole team, involve the whole team in educating the patient, taking care of the patient, and hearing from everyone the same story, patient will understand and follow it better. So one of my last slide is the parathyroid hormone. It's the last but not the least important. So the normal level is 150 to 600. And PTH is secreted in response to hyperphosphatemia or high phosphorus, low calcium, and low level of calcitriol. So PTH actually releases calcium and phosphorus from the bones to balance the calcium and phosphorus in the blood. So what we do is we use oral calcitriol or oral vitamin D and calcimimetics in order to control the PTH secretion, and can only give the active oral vitamin D if calcium and phosphorus levels are not too high or not too out of balance. And you will hear from your dietitian about that, and doctor usually orders it per protocol, so dietitians monitor it. So the key points to remember here is the whole team needs to work together. Optimal nutritional outcomes reduces the morbidity and mortality, improves the quality of life for the patients. Utilize the tools that are available out there for different cultural education and the recipes and what the patient handouts are out there. Communicate changes if you are a patient. Communicate the changes in health status to prevent the decline in health. Motivate the patients if you are a team member, and encourage the whole team involvement or the engagement. Enjoy your holidays. Be safe out there. And I will pass it back to Patty for the recipe. This is a wonderful
apple galette, which is actually kind of like an open-faced apple pie. The reason I chose this is that it's a lot less time-consuming for people who have a kidney disease. It's also really easy for caregivers and also any professionals watching this who are short on time. So what we're going to do is we're going to slice some apples. We're going to peel them, take the seeds out, and slice them really thin and put them in some lemon water so they don't turn brown. So then what I want to do is slice. And I'm going to add these. So now we're going to actually make the apple pie filling part of this. So I've drained off my lemon water with my sliced apples, some maple syrup, cinnamon, just a little bit of nutmeg, vanilla extract, and I'm sprinkling in just a little bit of cornstarch to help absorb any liquid that comes off of these apples. Now these apples are Granny Smith apples, so they're kind of tart to begin with. And I'm going to mix this all up. And you want to make sure you get all those spices all over the apples. So the apples should have a nice kind of brown coating on them. All right. Now, you can make your own pie crust, or you can actually buy up, because you only need a single layer pie crust to do this. So let me get some gloves and I'm going to show you how we do this. So I have an actually pre-made, store-bought pie crust that you're going to roll out. And you'll notice I'm actually doing this upside down on a sheet pan, which is fine. Okay. And then with a galette, we're going to put our apples right in the center, leaving about an inch from the edge. And what I want to do is take just a little bit more cinnamon than I have and sprinkle it over the top. You'll see I'm just dusting it. You want to make sure you dust the center because this is the part that is going to be showing through. And then with the galette, we just roll up and fold over an edge of our crust. So this is going to trap any liquid. But notice how much quicker and easier this is than if I had to roll out my dough and put it into a pie plate. Okay? And then I just kind of press those. So you actually want this kind of rough looking, so it's very homemade. And then we're going to take one egg, beat that up, and we're going to brush this right over the edge of our pie crust. Take this egg, and I just want to brush just the edges that are sticking up, and I want to get into those seams so that this will seal and keep the crust from popping open while it's baking. This is also going to help give your pie crust a really beautiful brown color when it's through baking in the oven. And then I just make sure that that has been sealed with the egg. And there we go. We're ready to be put into the oven. So you're going to bake this at 400 degrees for about 35-45 minutes. You want to bake this till the crust is nice and golden brown and the apples are tender if you stick a fork through the center of them. So this is our apple galette coming out of the oven. You'll notice how golden brown the crust is from that egg wash on the side. The apples are nice and tender. We've only sweetened this with some maple syrup, and it's got those great fall flavors of cinnamon and nutmeg.
I'm really hungry now.
Well, we had to end with dessert.
Yep, and it was a wonderful dessert. I know question came to my mind. Other fruits can be substituted as well, right? For the for instead of apple.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't like
Yes.
cherries or strawberries, yeah.
Yeah, based on the mineral count of what people consume, you can use different fruits. And then you could also use different sweeteners. I use maple because of the holidays, and you can cut back on that. The other thing is the recipe, what you'll see when you get sent the recipe, it's for 6 servings. You can make 8, so the portion size is smaller, which I know dietitians always love for us to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I saw a couple comments saying that they use the cultural handouts for their patient education, which is great, because years ago we didn't have those available. So now it's available, and those resources are great to use.
All right, we pass this back to Doris.
Yes, that was so wonderful. Oh, I am so hungry. So we've gone over time a little bit. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions and answers, although Chhaya, I appreciate that you've answered some of the questions already. Go ahead and put all your questions in the chat. All unanswered questions will be answered in the follow-up email. So that would be good. And so for those of you who could just hang on for a little bit longer, I just want to end with one last question for Chhaya and for Duane. What is one takeaway from today that you would like to leave with our audience? Chhaya,
Sure.
we'll start with you.
Okay, so one thing I would like to say is eat in moderation. If you know that you're eating something high in potassium or phosphorus or sodium, eat in moderation, enjoy your holidays, but be safe at the same time. So portion control and enjoy your holidays, be safe out there. I'll pass it to Duane.
Thank you. I have to support that, and I would twist it a little, being the chef. I always save my favorite food for the end of the meal. So desserts are always special. So if there's a holiday meal, an item that I'm craving, that will be the last thing I eat because I'm full and I'm not gonna binge eat on it. So I always go with the 5-bite rule. They have to be small bites, not the biggest bites you can eat. But it's another great way of doing what Chhaya is saying about portion control. And you have to enjoy the holidays. You waited all year for this special meal.
Wonderful. I like that word, enjoy. Enjoy the foods, but good tips for us. So thank you very, very much. I just want to thank you, Chhaya and Chef Duane, and thank you to our planning committee. Thank you to our sponsor, Pentec Health, and to all of you for attending today. Just a reminder, the follow-up email will have the recipes, the videos, the slides, the recording of today's webinar, and all resources mentioned. Please fill out the feedback survey. The link is in the chat right now, and will also be in your follow-up email. And your input is very important to us because we want to know what topics are important and relevant for you, and that helps us to plan for future sessions. So good afternoon. Have a wonderful holiday season. Stay safe, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.